And with that, we are set to begin. We have our candidates here for Assembly District 15. On our right, Jovanka Beckles. And to the left, Buffy Wicks. The format now will return to what we had during the mayor's debate earlier this evening. It'll be a 3-minute intro period, a 2-minute answer to each question that will be asked to both candidates, and then ultimately a 1-minute closing period. So with that, thanks again to everyone for being here. This is a great League of Women Voters event, along with the various neighborhood councils who have sponsored the event tonight, and it's gone quite well. So with that, let's begin with our 3-minute opening statement, and let's start with Buffy Wicks.
Can you guys hear me?
Excuse me. Naomi will hold up the green one when you have 1 minute, the yellow one when you have 30 seconds, and the red one, it's over.
Okay.
Thank you, Bea.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. My name is Buffy Wicks. I'm running for Assembly District 15, and yes, Buffy is my real name. So I know you want to ask that question, so we'll just start with that out of the gate. I'm born and raised here in the great state of California. I actually grew up in a tiny little town, sort of in Trump's America, very conservative part of California. I grew up in a trailer. I didn't come from a lot, but I had parents who pushed me to think big. And I had access to good schools back then, back when our schools were still good. And I had our California community college system, which is where I went. I went to community college and worked my way through school. And after I got my 4-year degree, I moved here to the Bay Area. I lived in San Francisco, and I was an organizer in the anti-war movement. And I embarked on a 20-year career of working in progressive politics. I worked for Howard Dean's presidential campaign, organizing in Iowa. I cared about health care. I cared about the war. I cared about these big issues at the time. I then joined the labor movement, working for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, fighting for better health care and better wages for Walmart workers. Walmart, who disproportionately hires women of color and treats them pretty terribly. I was then lucky enough to be one of the early hires on an upstart campaign for a guy named Barack Hussein Obama. And I moved to Chicago in March of 2007, and I was employee number 32 for him. And when I got there, we were 30 points down in the polls, and we were trying to elect the first black president in this country who came to us from Hawaii via Indonesia with the middle name Hussein. It was a real sure bet, I can assure you. But I was really lucky to be immediately deployed to be the California field director where I was living here in the district, and I helped develop the president's community organizing model. That was part of the work that I did for him. And when we won, he took me with him to the White House. So off to DC I went. I served as the deputy director of the Office of Public Engagement. I worked on a number of things. I worked on the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to hold our banks accountable. I worked on student loan reform. I helped get Justice Sotomayor, the first Latina Supreme Court justice, confirmed. And I also worked on the Affordable Care Act. I've worked on big, vexing public policy challenges. And I know, I've seen it myself, we can pass progressive public policy that helps people. We have the ability to do this. I've worked on these issues. I bring a certain level of experience to this district that I can take with me to Sacramento, because this district deserves not just someone who's going to vote the right way, but who's going to fight the right way, and who's going to lead the right way. This is a district that should be in a leadership role, and I will fight for equity in our public schools. We have to pay our teachers more. We have to fund public education. I will fight for affordable housing so that everyone has a home. I will fight to make sure all of our children have clean air to breathe and drink, clean water to drink. I will fight for quality and safe public transportation, and I will fight for an equitable social safety net that allows all of us to have these things. Because in the end of the day, I believe what Bruce and Sherry Wicks taught me when I was a little girl, that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. Thank you so much for letting me be here today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Jovanka Beckles.
I'll stand for this our introductory remarks, and then going forward, I think you all can see us, right? Everybody can see us? Mm-hmm. Excellent. My name is Jovanka Beckles. I am a 2-term Richmond City Council member. I've been on the Richmond City Council for 8 years. I've had the honor and the privilege of being on the City Council for 8 years. Before that, I was a planning commissioner for 2 years. Before that, I was an economic development commissioner for 2 years. I've lived in the Bay Area consecutively for 30 years. I've worked with the mental health and the substance abuse and the homelessness field for 30 years as well. I've lived in Richmond for 13, actually a total of 20 years. I've worked in Richmond for 21 years. So I'm from here, I am you. And I'm running for the state assembly for the reason that I ran for city council in the first place. I ran for city council years ago, had no idea, no thought of being in public office, but the reason I won was because of a home invasion that happened to me, my wife, and my son. And those young men had a gun to my head, had a gun to my family, and even though that happened, by the time they got to my son's room, they looked around his room, saw his things, and they were said to each other, wow, it must be nice to be loved. Y'all, I will never, ever forget that. Because as traumatic as that was, it helped me to realize that even though I've been working in the health field to do healing with the children and the families that I work with, there was still something missing. And what was missing was policy, was leveling the playing field. And so the first thing I did when I got into city council was I brought forward, worked with community organizations like the Safe Return Project, like Rubicon. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I worked for Rubicon as well, 3 years, 18 years as the county. That's the Children's Mental Health Services worker. But working together with them, we created the most innovative, the most progressive, the most bold, innovative, revolutionary ban-the-box policy because everyone deserves a second chance. And so now I'm running for state assembly for the very same reason, because we have to have policies in place that level the playing field for all of us. We have to have elected officials who are going to put the needs of the people, the needs of the planet, over the profits of the billionaire class. We have to have people like myself who run without taking any corporate money, without taking developer money, without taking charter school money, because I am beholden only to you. I am a leader in Richmond who listens to you. When folks in the South Side say, we don't want a cannabis dispensary, I have no problem with cannabis, but because you didn't want it, I voted no. But folks wanted more parks. Folks wanted stop signs. Folks called and talked about wanting sidewalks. Folks talked about wanting crosswalks. And I responded. And so that's who I am. I respond to you for your concerns and your needs, and that's the kind of representative I will be for you in Sacramento with your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Beckles. And for our first question, and I'll remind you, question-answer periods will be 2 minutes for each candidate. And for our first question, we'll go with one that was brought by a member of the public. And the question is, you are competing for the seat of a popular community leader who is one of the very few African-American men to serve in the California Assembly. Do you believe Tony Thurmond was an effective assembly member? Why or why not? And which aspects of his legacy would you uphold or change if elected? Let's begin with Ms. Beckles, please.
The legacy that I will continue is one like Tony, who really puts children first, puts our communities first. Tony is a Richmond resident. I'm a Richmond resident. Tony is an African-American man. I'm an African-American woman. Tony's black. I prefer the word black, so I'll use black from going forward. We won't have any black representatives in the Bay Area if I'm not elected, and that would be a shame. That would be a shame not for us as people of color, as black folk, to not have a seat at the table. Because if we don't have a seat at the table, we won't be able to have the kinds of laws that benefit our communities. So yes, I think that Tony was an effective leader, and I intend to continue in his legacy of funding and providing resources for Richmond, because this is a Richmond crowd. He's done a really amazing job of providing resources from Sacramento that we've needed, and I'll continue to do the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tony Thurmond, those are big shoes to fill, honestly, for any of us. He's had a great career. He's been a strong advocate. I would be honored to fill his shoes as best as I possibly could. You know, in terms of the issues, he's fought for children. He's fought for more funding for public education. He's fought to hold our charter schools accountable. You know, he's fought for workforce housing for teachers. And you hear now stories of teachers living in Stockton and Tracy, commuting to the Bay Area because they can't afford to live in the communities in which they're working. So he's trying to tackle some of these big challenges that result in, you know, a teacher shortage. He's been heading this on his whole career. And so I respect his career. I would do anything to try to live up to what he has been doing. In terms of the challenges around diversity, this is a real issue. And it's an issue across the state. And it shouldn't be up to one seat. We should have diverse candidates running in all of these districts. And we should be supporting a pipeline of young candidates who we help and we raise money for, and we work on organizing skills and all these things so that we have candidates all up and down the state in diverse and non-diverse districts. And this goes beyond politics as well. Our C-suites, our boardrooms, Silicon Valley, you see the disparities in the power structure that exist in this state that need to be addressed head on. And so if I'm able to get this job, those are the things that I want to work on. I think Tony's been a fantastic assembly member. I would be honored to work with him. The last thing I'll say is Tony has a really unique and strong ability to work well with other people and to really sit down with folks, understand where they're coming from, build the coalition needed and necessary. And I do believe I have the ability to do that, and I would love to work with Tony if he gets the job and I get the job so that we can bring more funding for our public education.
Thank you, Ms. Wicks. And this next question will be going to you first. This is another question from a member of the public. This is charter schools and public schools are a major issue in this district and in this community. This is a yes or no, along with ample time for explanation. Do you support a moratorium on charter schools until the charter school law is changed to allow districts to deny charter school petitions? Do you support that moratorium? Yes or no? And please go into detail about why.
Sure, and I'm happy to answer the question. Thank you so much for asking it. The charter law was passed in 1993, and up until about a week ago, there have been zero reforms. Maybe 2 weeks ago, there have been zero reforms on this bill. Fortunately, the legislature passed outlawing for-profit charters. Frankly, they should have never been allowed to begin with. I fully support that, and I'm glad we did it. We need more reforms on charters, including subjecting them to the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, the Political Reform Act. I think that work is very, very important. We need to make it easier to identify and shut down poor-performing charter schools. These are taxpayer dollars, and we need to be treating them as such. I don't support a statewide moratorium. What I do support is figuring out ways that our local districts have more agency and more control when these decisions are being made. You look at, to me, the charters are a symptom of a broader problem. And the broader problem is that we are undervaluing and underfunding public education in this state. We're 46th out of 50th. We should be number 1. So parents shouldn't be forced to make a choice. Their local traditional public schools should be great. That's what we should be fighting for and advocating for. And if a parent wants to send their child to a charter because they view that as a better alternative, I cannot look that parent in the eye and say no, right? I'm a parent, I'm trying to make the best decisions for my children, but they shouldn't be forced to have to make the choice. Our local traditional public schools in these neighborhoods should be great. That should be the choice there should even be a choice, right? Because their local schools should be great. So I think we need a lot more reforms around our charter schools. I think we need to bring about more accountability, more transparency, more local control so that districts can make these decisions with more agency.
Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Jovanka Beckles, same question, please.
I support a moratorium on charter schools. And the reason for that is because our public school system is charters right now are sucking the lifeblood out of our public school systems, and I think that it's important that we fully fund our public school systems. Teachers are not getting the wages they deserve. Our students don't have the resources that they deserve. Classrooms are overcrowded. And what happens is when you start to take away resources from our public schools, and then you start to see them become bad, then it gives people more reason, to support charters when if we just fund our public school systems and give it what it needs, we can have some wonderful public schools. And so that's why I support a moratorium, because I believe in the public school system. But I also believe that's why we also need to have, and it's on my platform, that's why we need to have free childcare. We can do that. In the fifth largest economy in the world, we can do that. Fifth largest economy in the world, we can have free preschool. In communities of color, what happens is people often can't afford preschool, and so our children are already starting behind. And I believe that we can get back to a California that works for us, that works for working people, and that has amazing public school system that's fully funded and treating our teachers with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Beckles. We have another really good question from the audience, and I'll preface this with you're vying to go into the state assembly where your ability to work with others is going to be crucial. It's not an executive position, but one within a large legislature. The question is, your effectiveness in the assembly would depend in part on your ability to work with others. What evidence can you share that you would be able to work with other lawmakers with differing backgrounds or ideological positions? What evidence can you provide that you are able to work well in a legislative environment? Let's begin with Ms. Wicks.
Sure. So I've worked on issues that involve a lot of different stakeholders. So I think my record speaks for itself. You know, I work on the Affordable Care Act. My job there was to build support amongst the progressive community for the ACA. But when you look at ACA, you know, we had the insurance industry, the doctors, the nurses, the consumers, the hospital associations, women's groups, advocates, consumer groups. There's a Congress in addition to that, right? So pulling all of those pieces together to try to figure out what is the policy that we can push forth to ensure that we ensure that as many people have health insurance as possible of votes that we can then get, right? And with ACA or with healthcare, many of us wanted single payer, many of us wanted a public option, but we couldn't get the votes on that. So we had to move the ball as far as we could for that moment in time. Now we can build on that. And sometimes you don't get 100% of what you want, right? But you can get as close as you possibly can. So it's figuring out how do you do that. But I think first and foremost, you have to be willing to sit down and listen to people that you don't always agree with. And I think, frankly, our elected officials need to do a lot more listening these days. And I come out of community organizing, where we are taught to figure out, I need to sit down and listen, understand how we have shared values, where we have commonality, so that we can build from there. You know, my dad belongs to the NRA. You know, he's a hunter, he drinks Coors, he drives a Chevy, somehow he ended up with me and my gay brother. I don't know how that happened, but I've sat and had these conversations with him, and after the Parkland shooting, I got my dad to take off his NRA bumper sticker off of his car, right? But that just involves sitting down and really listening to folks and understanding where they're coming from and having real dialogue with people, which sometimes is uncomfortable. And you can never compromise on your values, but you have to be able to work with people. And I've been endorsed by a variety of legislators, and also Gavin Newsom, who will be our governor, because I think he believes that I'm the person who's suited to go to Sacramento and be most effective at this.
Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Jovanka Beckles, please.
So I'm a wraparound facilitator for the county. I've been doing that for 18 years. And what wraparound services is, it's a multidisciplinary approach to increasing the quality of life for the children and their families. I'm the facilitator for these multidisciplinary groups. That means I'm working with teachers, I'm working with children, their parents, their families, their neighbors. I'm working with principals and social workers and probation officers and police officers who are sometimes sitting at the table. And you can probably imagine that's a large group of people who share different values and ideas on how things should be done. And as a facilitator, I have to work with them. I have to be the one to make sure that we stay on track and that we stay on target, and that target being having that, working towards the goal of increasing increasing the living for the children. Pardon me, I'm a little distracted. At any rate, that's what I do for a living. I have to be able to get along with people, because when you have a goal to increase the quality of life for a student, we're not always going to get along. We don't always get along. And sometimes people, they get into fights at these tables. Literally, there have been a couple times where I've had to break up a fight between family members. But I have to be able to be cordial. I have to be able to listen. I have to be able to come to a middle ground if we're going to achieve the goals of helping the child and family and the community do better. So I'm a coalition builder. That's why I'm endorsed by 30 grassroots organizations, 8 environmental organizations, 20 unions and locals.
Thank you, Ms. Beckles. Thank you very much. This next question will go to you first, Ms. Beckles. This is another great question that we've gotten from the audience. This is about housing. In our community, as we know, we have soaring valuations, inability for many young families, or families of any age for that matter, to afford decent housing. We have rising homelessness. What's your assessment of the housing conditions, what the problem is in the Bay Area and in AD 15 specifically, and what would your plan in Sacramento be to alleviate this? Ms. Beckles, please begin.
Yes, the problem in the Bay Area with housing is that, as the slogan for Prop 10 goes, the rent is too damn high. We don't have a shortage of housing and luxury housing. We have a shortage, however, of affordable housing. And that's the problem. That's why we have to work collaboratively as a region, and which is what we're doing. Richmond and Berkeley and Oakland, we're working together with those elected officials over there to figure out this problem together, because that's really how we're going to do it. And so I support Prop 10 for that reason, because we need more affordable housing. People can't afford to buy a house anymore. Young people can't even afford to rent a place anymore. Students have to live 5 people at times together because they can't afford the rent, and that's just really sad. And so as your next assembly member in Sacramento, I will advocate for building more affordable housing, and the way that we do that, we can also have, in addition to affordable housing, we can have more public housing. We see that people aren't taking Section 8 anymore. That's why more people are on the street. A lot of public housing are closing. The hacienda right here in Richmond closed. And where did all those people go? Most of them went on the streets, and that's sad. And so I will advocate for taxing vacant properties and speculators, because when we have stability in our neighborhoods, me and you as homeowners, it makes for a healthier environment and healthier communities. So as your elected official in Sacramento, I plan to be an advocate for not only renters, but homeowners as well. I'm a homeowner. And as a homeowner, I support rent control for that reason, because we can't continue in this direction, and we have to have elected officials who are not taking any money from the real estate investors.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Beckles. Ms. Wicks, same question, please.
Thank you very much for asking. And this is one of the main reasons I'm running for this seat. You know, as someone who grew up in a trailer, I dreamt of having a wooden house, which sounds like a strange dream, but when you grow up in a trailer, you're embarrassed to invite your friends over. It's like a real thing, and I was a renter for 20 years. I got evicted from my apartment when I was in my 20s. It got flipped to high-priced condos I couldn't afford. And a couple years ago, my husband and I bought our first house. And it was a really big deal for me. It's very difficult to buy a home here. And if you look at what's happened regionally, we've had an influx of high-paying jobs in the region, which are good. We want high-paying jobs in our region. But we haven't kept up with the housing supply. So look at Silicon Valley. Apple built their massive $5 billion spaceship glass headquarters. They were required by local law to have 11,000 parking spots. Guess how much housing was required? 0. So where do those folks go with their $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 salaries? They move up the peninsula into the South Bay, into the East Bay. They get on their buses, they go down there, right? They're now busing people from Sacramento because they can't afford to live here anymore, right? So that's what's happening in the area. They're competing with our dishwashers, our artists, our students for housing. So we need to build more homes. Almost none of the communities in the Bay Area have met the needs. I'm a big supporter of transit-oriented housing, building around our BART stops, investing in our public transportation. You can't have a housing conversation unless you have the transportation conversation to go with it. So we need to build subsidized low-income housing, because we do need more low-income housing, but also middle-income and market rate, all the above. I also support housing for workforce. A lot of teachers, like I said, commuting from Stockton and Tracy to work here. I support that as well. I support incentivizing ADUs and making sure that we create more density where we need to. I also put out the idea of a public infrastructure bank to help fund some of these things and being creative with how we finance some of this stuff. We also have to guard against displacement. Displacement is a major issue in our communities. There's a number of things I think we can do there. We have to increase the renter tax credit. Right now it's $60 a year. I mean, 3/4 of Californians are one $700 emergency way of going into poverty. I have a bunch of other ideas as well, but hopefully we'll get another housing question.
Thank you, Ms. Wicks. And we will take this next question to you as well to begin. This is another question from the public. And this is about another aspect of housing, frankly. It's about homelessness. Of course, expanding supply can do some to alleviate that, but there will still be populations of people who are unable to afford decent housing and wind up in our streets and our right-of-ways and on private property and so forth. What policies will you advocate for in Sacramento that will help alleviate deep homelessness here in our communities and do so in a humane and just way?
Sure.
Ms. Wicks, please begin 2 minutes.
Sure. And I know in Alameda County we've seen a 40% increase in homelessness in the last 2 years. And I'm sure those numbers are very similar here. And you talk to folks that run shelters, they're at capacity. So a couple things I think we need to do. One, we need more outreach workers because we are at capacity in terms of staff resources. Two, we need more mental health and drug and alcohol treatment. You know, homelessness didn't exist in the way that it does now until Ronald Reagan in his infinite wisdom got rid of mental health funding in the 80s. So we need to bring back more mental health resources, community-based mental health resources, drug and alcohol treatment facilities. We need to support more rapid housing, temporary housing. As I said, many of our shelters are at capacity. There's a lot of research that shows that if someone gets on the street, the sooner you can pull them off and into some sort of shelter, the easier it is for them to get onto their feet. And the longer they're homeless, the harder it is and the more difficult it is. So quick, rapid rehousing. The fourth thing, and this is the hardest part, it's the long-term permanent supportive housing. We need more long-term supportive permanent housing with those wraparound services for many of these folks. The fifth thing that I think is important, and Gavin Newsom has called for this, and I think this is very smart, and I support him and he's supporting me. I'd love to work with him on this. He's calling for a Secretary of Homelessness, sort of the homelessness czar, who is a cabinet-level position that appoints to him directly, whose sole mission is to make sure our federal, state, county, city, and nonprofit resources are being spent effectively and that we are tackling this problem like the state of emergency that it is, and that we're working regionally to address this challenge. So I think coupled with the funding is the leadership and the intentionality of our elected officials to really tackle it. I think a lot of our mayors are trying their best with the resources that they have, but it's going to require more resources. It's going to require more leadership. You know, we finally have a rainy day. We have a budget surplus. We should put more of those resources into this, and this is an issue I care about and want to work on if I get this job.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Same question, Jovanka Beckles, please.
You can see it, go to my platform on my website, jovanka.org, under platform, and you'll see my extensive ideas for alleviating our homeless issue and challenge. But in Sacramento, I will advocate for hundreds of thousands of new affordable housing, and we have the means to be able to develop that and build that. Again, we can tax vacant properties and speculators who come in and buy up properties in our neighborhoods and leave them empty, which of course destabilizes just the amount what we as homeowners are able to, destabilizes our communities rather. I will also advocate for substance abuse, allocating resources for substance abuse as well as mental health resources, make it easier for homeowners to build second dwelling units in their yards. If you have big yards, that make that easier. Right now, it's a really difficult process. And I'll tell you, although it's not a policy, it really is a matter of will. It's a matter of electeds having the will to help our homeless population. We're seeing banks taking advantage of our elders, and so Ms. Leila Madison, who lives right here in the South Side, was about to be evicted by Wells Fargo and other agencies that work with them. And when I got the phone call that morning, I didn't want to get up. I was tired. But when I heard that this was happening to a 92-year-old Richmond resident, I got on my bed, I sprung, I ran over there, and I made sure that everybody saw what was going on by recording it. And I think that that's really what true leadership is about, that it's not about me, it's about really working hard and going beyond our physical and mental will to help others.
Thank you, Ms. Beckles. In a short period of time tonight, over 3 lively debates and 3 really important offices, we've packed a lot in. We've come toward the conclusion of our evening. It's time now for us to have our closing statements. As we mentioned earlier, the closing statement will only be 1 minute, so please be as concise as you can and address whatever issues you wish. Let's start with Ms. Wicks, and it's a 1-minute closing statement, please.
Thank you so much for being here and for hanging out to this late hour. I believe we are in a critical moment in our nation's history right now where we will look back on this moment 10, 20, 30 years from now and say, what did you do then? And for me, I want to be able to look my daughter in the eye and say I did everything I could to fight for affordable housing, for better education for our children, for quality and safe public transportation, to protect our environment, and all the things I know that we all care about. And that's why President Obama, Senator Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Secretary of State Alex Padilla, Irma Anderson, Uche, Nat Bates, Jim McMillan, Tom Butt, many leaders across this community have endorsed my campaign. That's why I've been endorsed by the West Contra Costa County Democratic Club. It's why I've had 67 house parties in West Contra Costa County. I've been in many of your living rooms. I've sat and listened to you. I understand where you're coming from. I'm excited to go to Sacramento and work with you on the shared things that we care about. We have the opportunity right now to fix these problems. I know we can. I've seen it. We can do big things. Thank you so much for letting me be here. I would be honored to have your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wicks. Jovanka Beckles, your closing statement, please.
I'd be honored to have your support. You all know me. I don't know Barack Obama. I don't, and he doesn't know me. But I do know you, and I do know this district because I've lived here for over 30 years now. But what's important really is a candidate's track record and whether or not that candidate has a record for us to even consider. In my track record in Richmond, I helped pass, I brought forward, we raised the minimum wage, we banned the box, we brought rent control to our city, we made Richmond a sanctuary city, we kept parks open. So I'd love to have your support because as your assembly member in the 5th largest economy in the world, we can't afford to have single-payer health care for all. We can't afford to have free college and free preschool and free child care. We can't afford to build affordable housing in the 5th largest economy in the world. We can afford to take care of ourselves. We can afford to take care of each other because we have the resources, and I'd be honored to have your support in this election. We need a voice at the table.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Beckles. And before we close, if we could remain seated, I'd like to call up our wonderful council presidents to address you as we conclude. Please, neighborhood council presidents, come on up.
Ladies and gentlemen, what an evening. We have had a great evening. We want to thank each and every one of you for coming out and participating in addition to the council members. Shouldn't be just the presidents, but Coronado, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And Santa Fe, thanks you. It's great for these neighborhood councils to get together and to have a great event. Thank the candidates for being here. Thanks for coming. Reverend Shoemake, thanks a lot for the facility and helping us with the coordination. And to the League of Women Voters, thank you so much. Glad you're here. You did a great job. Made us look good. We appreciate that.
Really ditto. But also thank you to Linda for doing this, for doing the bulk of the work.
Yes, Ned Bate called you General Patton. He was right. All right. Thanks a lot.